Hello, my name is Tom Williams and I'm a Senior Director for Nature Action at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and I'm delighted to speak with you today about nature, biodiversity and business. I'd first like to thank the organisers of this forum, Wbcsd Taiwan and Sinopec Holding, and their chairman, Ms. Shi Quan Chen, for the invitation to be here and for making sure this important topic is part of the agenda. For my presentation today, I'm going to cover three aspects: a high-level overview of the state of nature and the role of business, an insight to the work we are doing at Wbcsd to support business on their nature positive journey, and then take a look at financing for nature in terms of the financing needs and opportunities. So in terms of the state of nature and business, what we have seen in the last 2 to 3 years is that nature is moving up the agenda, the political agenda, the business agenda, and to some degree our social agenda, as we increasingly understand the importance of nature in terms of our dependency on it and the impact of our actions on nature loss. And our dependency on nature is absolute. Our entire global economy is to some degree dependent on nature. Without water, without land, oceans and biodiversity, our economy would simply collapse. And this was a key point made by the Dasgupta Review, a review commissioned by the UK Treasury that was published in 2021, which was tasked with looking at the economics of biodiversity in the same way that the Stern Review looked at the economics of climate change in 2006. And the review states that the economy needs to be embedded within the biosphere and not external to it, meaning the stocks and flows of natural capital need to influence the economy and not vice versa. And if we look at how the current model with the economy external to our biosphere has driven nature loss, there are three main economic systems that contribute to this. Firstly, food, land and ocean use. Secondly, infrastructure and the built environment. And then thirdly, energy. And the sectors within these systems are significantly contributing to the degradation of nature and biodiversity loss. And the impacts coming from the sectors are driving pressures on our ecosystems. And those five pressures are land, water, sea use change, resource exploitation, climate change, pollution, and invasive species. And as a consequence, business are changing the state of nature, especially the ecosystem and species balance around the world. The WWF Living Planet Index, which is a measure of the state of the world's biological diversity, tells us that in the last 50 years, we have lost nearly 70% of all wildlife populations. This is a severe warning that the rich biodiversity that sustains all life on our planet is in crisis. In Montreal last December, after 2 years of delay, the UN Convention for Biological Diversity, CBD, staged its 15th conference of parties. On the table was a new deal for nature for member states to adopt. This is the so-called Global Biodiversity Framework that sets the course for the next decade on nature action. Within the Global Biodiversity Framework, there are 22 targets, and whereas for climate, we have the 1.5 degree target, for nature, given its complexity, we have over 20 targets covering aspects such as restoration and conservation targets. From a finance perspective, the Global Biodiversity Framework committed to mobilizing $200 billion per year to support its implementation, and the redirection of over $500 million of environmentally harmful subsidies to be targeted towards nature positive outcomes. I'll come back later on this financing gap. And then for business, target 15 is of critical importance. This requires all large companies and financial institutions to assess and disclose their risks, impacts and dependencies on nature along their operations, supply and value chains and portfolios. The next steps of the Global Biodiversity Framework implementation are for jurisdictions to adopt and reflect these targets in policies and regulations, and for business to start aligning their action with these targets. One of the GBF targets, Target 8, reflects the need for integrated nature and climate action. And this is seen most significantly as it relates to nature-based solutions. And over the last 5 years or so, we have increasingly seen the deployment of nature-based solutions to support net zero strategies. Nature-based solutions could deliver up to 37% of the emission reductions needed by 2030. And as this chart on the left shows, nature-based solutions can contribute to net emission reductions through avoidance and through removals. And most of this potential is within the food and agricultural value chains. On the right, you see the significant emissions coming from food value chains and the abatement potential for nature-based solutions within food and agricultural value chains. So we know the scope and scale of the challenge and opportunities. Both the nature positive and net zero trajectories give clear indication and direction for where we need to move business. And what we're doing at Wbcsd now for business is helping on the how-to. And the main way that we are doing this is through our nature positive roadmaps. And a starting point for this roadmap development was back in 2021, when we convened a core group of Wbcsd members and partners to unpack what this term nature positive means for business. This culminated in 6 nature positive building blocks, which we published in early 2022 as part of a practitioner's guide for nature positive. In June of 2022, a number of organizations, including Wbcsd, TNFD, Science-Based Targets for Nature, Business for Nature, and the World Economic Forum, decided to publish the ACT-D high-level business actions. This was intended to send a signal to the business community that all of our various work was aligning around these 4 high-level actions of assess, commit, transform, and disclose. And in the run-up to both the climate and biodiversity COPs last year, we published our first nature positive roadmap guidance document, which provides the high-level navigation through this emerging corporate accountability space for nature, and also the first phase of our nature positive roadmap work for the Forest Solutions Group. Now, central to so much of this work are 2 key standards or frameworks that provide the cornerstones of this emerging accountability system for nature. First, science-based targets for nature, which will help companies determine how far and how fast they need to go with their nature commitments. And this covers water, land, oceans, and biodiversity. And secondly, the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, or TNFD, which, just like TCFD has provided for climate, is the framework to guide companies on what and how to disclose on nature-related financial disclosures. The first issue of Science-Based Targets for Nature will be released in late May this year, and the final TNFD framework will be released in September. The Science-Based Targets approach takes you through a 5-step process of assessing what's material to your company, through target setting for water, land, oceans, and biodiversity, and guidance on how to apply the mitigation hierarchy. For TNFD, it's very clearly linked to the pillars of TCFD, with governance, strategy, risk, and impact management, and metrics and targets being the 4 disclosure areas. And as both of these frameworks and standards have been evolving and developing, Wbcsd and its member companies have been testing and piloting them and feeding back into their development. And the way we have been doing this is through our nature positive roadmaps. For this work, we have grouped our members across 4 sectors: food and agriculture, forestry projects, energy, and the built environment. And we're taking them through this nature positive journey. So starting with materiality assessments at a sector level, through target setting and disclosures. The main outcome of this work is to provide a consistent and coherent journey for companies as they set nature targets, account for their impacts and dependencies on nature, and report on their progress. Ultimately, it is about getting companies ready to adopt science-based targets for nature and also the TNFD framework. For natural climate solutions, otherwise known as nature-based solutions for net zero strategies, we have described the 3 ways with example actions that corporates can deploy nature-based solutions as part of their net zero strategy. Firstly, to decarbonize within the value chain, so-called insetting, where GHG emissions are reduced. Second, high ambition beyond value chain mitigation action, where high quality NCS credits can be used to go above and beyond a company's decarbonisation pathway. And thirdly, natural climate solutions for removals to neutralise any residual emissions, specifically hard to abate near to the net zero target year. So together with the nature positive roadmaps and the natural climate solutions as part of net zero strategies, there are key pathways to restore and protect nature that support climate, biodiversity, and equity goals. Now, financing these transitions is obviously key. Without the required public and private sector finance, it's difficult to reach the scale and speed that's required. And if you look at the financing gap for nature, it stands at about $800 billion per year. A significant part of this gap could be met through redirecting environmentally harmful subsidies. This analysis from 2020 puts that opportunity at around $300 billion. For the private sector, there are financing opportunities for nature through improving supply chain sustainability, investing in natural infrastructure, biodiversity credits, and maximizing carbon markets to work for nature. And indeed, it's through carbon markets where we see immediate opportunities to mobilize finance into nature. Through our work at Wbcsd with the Natural Climate Solutions Alliance, we have developed guardrails for high quality, high integrity credits. This means that carbon credits have co-benefits related to nature, biodiversity, and social outcomes. And through 14 illustrative lighthouse projects, the NCS Alliance has demonstrated the kind of impact that high quality carbon credits can have in a high integrity market. Carbon removal and avoidance, restored land, species protection, and improved livelihood outcomes. Another emerging area for investment in nature is around soil health. And back in 2022, Wbcsd published a soil investment toolkit, which aims to help mainstream soil investments into corporate decision-making. In doing so, it explores the various financing mechanisms that exist for soil health, related to procurement, capital investments, payment for ecosystem services, for example. And if you look at this example from Danone on the right, you can see the importance of working with farmers on the ground for such investments, identifying best practices, providing seed funding, moving on to debt financing. This progressive approach with farmers that couples capacity building with financing can be a really effective way to ensure investments in soil health pay off. So in summary, we see nature emerging at the top of the political and business agendas. The role that nature plays in our economy is clear, and we need to change the way we allocate and replenish natural capital. The long-awaited global biodiversity framework, like the Paris Agreement has done for climate, gives us a clear direction of travel for the next decade. We now need to move on to implementation. And a key part of this implementation is the emerging importance of a corporate accountability system for nature that enables business to set clear nature targets and demonstrate their progress towards them. Frameworks such as science-based targets for nature and TNFD are critical here. And finally, we must make sure our climate and nature strategies, investments, and actions are interdependent. Working on these two challenges separately can be counterproductive, and an integrated approach can really unlock finance to work for both climate and nature. So thank you for your attention today. If you want to find out more about anything I have covered today, please do check out the Wbcsd website or do reach out. So thank you for your attention, and I wish you a good rest of your event.